Hello and welcome to Wizards, Warriors and Words, a fantasy writing advice podcast. I'm Jed Herne, author of Across the Broken Stars, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-hosts, starting with Michael R. Fletcher.
That's me. I am him, apparently, I think.
Along with Rob Hayes.
Hello, I'm Rob Hayes.
And Dyrk Ashton.
That's me.
And today's episode will be all about dialogue. So we had some great dialogue just to start that episode off, Ben. Perhaps we could begin with a discussion of the biggest mistakes that we see in dialogue, both by other authors and by ourselves, that we try to avoid. Who wants to kick off?
Perfect syntax and complete sentences.
Interesting. Can you unpack that a bit?
A lot of
he's doing it right now.
And point.
People do say and right? People do interrupt themselves. People do not speak in perfect grammar. It all depends, and a lot of what I see with early authors that send me pieces is that they write dialogue that's too correct. Now, of course, this depends. Are you writing, medieval style epic fantasy? What kind of characters do you have, even if it's modern? How the hard part is getting into these characters. You need to kind of become the character and speak like the character. And when people are having a dialogue back and forth, are they arguing? People use different words and speak in different ways, depending on how they're talking and what they're talking about. And that can be one of the hardest things. The dialogue can be one of the absolute hardest things to do when it comes to writing. And sometimes it comes off as stilted. I've worked for many years on dialogue, and yet still sometimes I get criticized on my dialogue, whereas other people talk about how much they love the dialogue. You just never know what readers
very
do.
subjective.
Yeah, it's very subjective, but you have to do what you think works for you and works for the characters. Did I unpack that enough?
Yeah, if I'm allowed to just pack one little bit of that back in, with the regards to realism and stuff, I think that it is absolutely important. Thanks for miming the packing actions. It is absolutely important to consider that, yeah, you probably will have a bit of unrealisticness. Oh, the dog's looking at me now. Hello, Beagle. For people who are just listening, Rob has his doggo on his lap. So if you think we're all distracted, then that's why. But yeah, with
hijacking the episode with the Beagle.
Exactly. With regards to like realistic dialogue with ums and ahs and likes and lost trains of thoughts and everything like that. I'm personally sort of the mindset that like it's good to have that occasionally, but at the same time, I don't think that story dialogue should necessarily be realistic. I think it should be entertaining. And if that means that they speak in ways that no one would actually speak in real life, but it feels natural for the story, then I'm a big fan of that. So yeah, just wanted to point out.
I think
I totally agree.
Have certain characters doing it regularly, because then it becomes a character tick, basically.
Yes.
Which can help to provide characterization as well. But yeah, you don't want every single character starting off every single sentence with or trailing off because they've lost their train of thought.
Also a dog.
But yeah, certainly occasionally from time to time.
Another mistake that I see, and again, this can be a taste thing, and it's hard. It's just like the ums and ahs and interruptions and ers and pauses is dialects. A lot of people try to write out every word like it would be spoken by someone who's speaking Scottish, right? And quite often it can be almost unreadable. So what I did with some of the characters that are like that is I have a syntax, a sentence structure that they use, like a woman with a Russian accent. There are certain words that Russians leave out of English when they speak. So I do a little bit of that, but I don't try to like inflect in every word the accent. I'll throw a little thing here and there, a Russian word or something. And the same with a character who has supposedly a very heavy Scottish accent. But I don't write it, all of it, like it's a very heavy Scottish accent. And I do see a lot of new authors do that way too much, either that or they don't do it at all. And this person speaks with a Russian accent, but it reads just like English.
Yeah.
It's hard to strike that balance.
I think it comes again back to that idea of like sort of balancing between realism and entertainment, and just having like a taste and a bit of a hint of that, and then readers' minds will sort of fill in the rest. Like, I think, Rob, you may have done this in one of your books, or it might have been another book I read. But like, you know, if you tell readers that the character has a certain accent, and then you just occasionally throw in that little bit of inflection or different dialect, readers are going to do the rest of the job in their minds, and they will feel the accent.
I'm full on guilty of what Dyrk was saying as well, though. In my debut trilogy, The Ties That Bind, I have characters speaking in what's called the wild drawl, and they miss out letters, they miss out words. There's all sorts, and I did it for every single bit of dialogue. And I've tried reading through it myself, and it's impossible.
Wow. And you know Cockney as well, so that's saying something.
Yeah. I was full on guilty of that, but I was a new author at the time. It was my first trilogy, so yeah. But I'd say one of the pet peeves I have when it comes to dialogue is things like when a character is listening in on somebody else. So quite often you find it with like stuff like thief books and stuff where characters sneaking around and they'll hear a conversation, but it's like the conversation starts when they start listening in.
Yes.
It drives me insane because that's not the way it works. When you listen to a conversation, if you sneak into a room and listen into a conversation, chances are you're going to hear part of that conversation, not the whole thing. So
and they're probably not going to be
that sort of, the conversation isn't starting for that character.
No,
they are intruding upon it,
and they're probably not going to be like, oh yeah, so it's 9 p.m. Let's talk about our evil plan to blow up the White House with our nuclear bomb, just in case anyone else is nearby. Let's go through everything and talk about details that we already know, but will be useful for people listening to.
But you have to temper that also with the fact that there is information that needs to come across for the story.
Yes.
So the characters, may have to talk about this evil plan, but they probably shouldn't just start detailing everything about the evil plan that the good guy needs to know.
Exactly. Mike, what are some common mistakes that you see people make with dialogue?
I have rules for dialogue. Long dialogue, bad. People don't usually speak in paragraphs, especially if you're having a conversation. If you want banter, paragraphs, bad. 8 books, I don't think I've ever written an entire paragraph of dialogue. My general rule is you almost never get more than 3 sentences, 4 tops. But if you write 3 sentences of dialogue, look at them. Can you delete one without actually changing anything? If you can, cut it. Now you've got 2 sentences. Can you delete one of those without changing it? If you can, cut the fucker. So that is how, basically, if you want banter and fast dialogue, cut the fluff. People blurt out shit. I don't care about realism. That's not what I'm writing for. I'm writing for entertainment. And if you want banter, it's got to be a fast back and forth, people cutting each other off, and that happens. You write fast, you'll get that fast feel. 4 sentences in a row of one person speaking, you only get that in a lecture or if you're watching a podcast.
There's a point where a dialogue becomes a monologue.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great point. And I have the same rule with mine.
Monologue isn't a conversation. It's
unless you mean to do a monologue, and I've read
which is fine too.
Terrific monologues,
A monologue?
or it's a lecture. It's a class. I am guilty of incredibly long like lessons in my books. But that's kind of part of what the books are about. There are these older characters who simply tell these younger characters about things. And I try to balance that with sprinkling stuff through, but some things are just, it makes sense to me, at least in the context, that somebody needs to explain something. So I'll do that. Now, the hardest thing for me, especially with the large ensemble cast that I have of characters from all different time frames and have taken on the characteristics of basic different cultures all over the world, is finding that style that they speak in. Are they very proper British English? You know, they're going to speak very differently from a 17-year-old girl from Toledo, Ohio, right? Or woman, depending on where that break is in age between girls and women. I don't know exactly these days. But so not only that, and then find what that is, and then keep that consistent to the point where I try characters speaking where it doesn't say he says, she says, and I can put 5 characters in there. And if I can, just by the way this sentence is written, I can tell which character is speaking. Then I think I've done a decent job. If you can't, if it's all interchangeable, which I've seen, that's a mistake that I've seen, where any character could have said any of these things, right, in this same way. They all need to have their own personality to a certain extent, and that can be very difficult to do. With mine, it was even harder for me because I write in present tense, kind of omniscient. And so when I'm with a certain character in a closer kind of third person, I also will, and if I'm with their thoughts, I also will structure the prose based on that character. So there are ways that the story is being told outside of the dialogue that can shift slightly with each character. Now, a master at this, if you guys want to study something, this kind of thing is M.R. Carey, Mike Carey, with Girl with All the Gifts, Boy on the Bridge, the books of Coley, any of the books that he's written in the last 5 years. He is a master of voice. It is unbelievable what he's able to do when he goes to a different character. It's almost like it's written, written by a different author. He's able to, and yet it's not jarring. And I try to do that kind of thing, and whereas he's like, I'm not here when it comes to accomplishing it. So those kinds of things.
You have to take into account that it also quite often depends on the type, the genre of story you're telling. If you are telling a sort of classical epic fantasy, you know, a lot of the things we've talked about, you can't just sort of chuck out the window. They will talk in long sentences, you know, long paragraphs. They will basically monologue each other. It's a hallmark of the genre.
Complete sentences with much more proper grammar.
Exactly.
Right.
If you're sort of including a lot more of what you see in the modern style of fantasy, which is often termed grimdark just because it's modern, don't get me started on that one, they will have a lot of the sort of things we have definitely been talking about. You know, they will talk in stilted sentences, or, you know, there's a lot of banter, which you don't get so much in some of the classical stuff. A little more back and forth.
Michael J. Sullivan, hugely popular, epic, kind of classic style epic fantasy, uses very modern dialogue, very modern, and he gets away with it. I mean, I've seen some people complain they don't like modern style dialogue in this more medieval world style, with, you know, elves and whatever, kind of fantasy. but he does it in such a way that it works and it makes it's fun. And obviously it's worked for him. I mean, he is unbelievably successful.
Nobody's ever heard of Michael J. Sullivan.
Well, it's funny. A lot of people still haven't, but he sells as many books as the biggest.
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of the biggest fantasy writers, traditionally published fantasy writers out there, and it's just.
I think there's different levels.
If anybody wants to check out an example of using modern dialogue in more classic epic fantasy, his are a really, really good one to look at.
I think I'm guessing it's probably the more sort of modern style of dialogue rather than modern dialogue. You're not going to have characters saying "cool."
Well,
yeah, dude, let's go steal some swords.
You actually might, but no, yeah. As far as it's a more modern style dialogue, but they do sometimes use some more modern vernacular in their books.
Rob, don't you remember that scene where one of the characters pulls out an iPhone so they can maps their way to the fortress that they're trying to travel to?
We're going to get away to Mount Doom, boys. Hang on a minute. Google Maps has got me.
Yeah. Oh, it says if we take the Eagles, it's only half an hour. Or walking, it says 3 years. Which one should we pick?
Bastard Gollum's trying to lead us the wrong way. See?
GPS.
We should pause quickly because I've realized we've totally forgotten to do the featured book segment in the last 2 episodes we've recorded. I think, Rob, you're up. If you want to...
we've lost Jed.
I'm still here. Can you not hear me?
We lost you.
We can hear you, but we can't see you.
My video went.
Well,
I think I pressed the thing.
I'll pick a book that I have
Go,
nearby
Rob, go.
and say, there you go.
Hey, I love that book.
I love this book. I love this book so much. This is The Ember Blade by Chris Wooding, which not enough people have read. It's absolutely fantastic. And funnily enough, it fits because this is a book which has a very sort of classical epic fantasy feel to it. It has the structure and the characters of a classical fantasy, and yet it also takes so many lessons from the more modern style of fantasy and blends them together so perfectly.
Best of both worlds. Amazing.
Brilliant, and not enough people have read it. So The Ember Blade by Chris Wooding, which is book one of the, can never remember what the series is called, Dark Water, I think, trilogy or something like that.
Yeah, Dark Water Legacy, I think.
That's a big book.
It's so good. Rob and I talked about this a bit on a podcast we did a while ago. And yeah, it's just, it just does that thing that I think a good analogy is like how Batman Begins sort of like did everything that you want from a Batman movie, but in like a modern way. The Ember Blade does that for a lot of the Tolkien stuff. Like it's steeped in those kind of, the tropes of party of adventurers, like going through these haunted places and trying to, get to this destination. But it does it with like
literally have a Moria section.
Literally, yeah, they're literally in like this haunted castle.
It's not Moria.
Yeah,
I love it.
It's amazing. You got to check.
I mean, to be honest, I'm a massive Chris Wooding fanboy anyway. So
you got to get him on the podcast sometime. That would be amazing.
Yeah. I'd love to.
Yes, continuing with our discussion on dialogue. We've only got a few minutes left of this recording, but perhaps we could each share like the one thing that made like the biggest change for us in terms of how we write our dialogue. So like the one thing that sort of, was really useful for us in terms of, like just changing our understanding of dialogue. For me personally, it was probably subtext and realizing that my favorite dialogue scenes were usually the ones where the characters were talking about these things, but that wasn't really what they were talking about. So you might have two characters talking about, I don't know, like some weather thing that's going on. This is probably a very cliched example, talking about some weather thing that's going on, but really they're talking about like the trauma that one of the characters experienced as a result of their childhood or something like that. And it just goes back to that whole idea of showing and not telling you, even though dialogue is a very telling thing, because it allows you to dig deeper into what's actually going on there. And I think as a reader, it feels very rewarding to realize what they're actually talking about and to peel back those layers yourself.
Yeah. I think for me, choose a television series that you absolutely love and pay very close attention to how they do it. And that's, you know, my background, of course, I lean that way because my background is screenwriting. And it is amazing what you can learn from that kind of thing. And very often shows that have been out, the scripts are available online, even for episodes. So try to find those. You can do the same thing with a movie, but TV tends to, these days, they're written so well and they have longer story arcs like books. So it might be a little bit better, but I would say, and pay very close attention to how that's written. I know that background has helped me a lot, and I think it could help other folks.
See, funnily enough, my point was going to be, I think one of my biggest sort of like influences on dialogue is Firefly. Funnily enough, TV series, because I learned so much, not just from Firefly, actually, from Joss Whedon. You know, Firefly, Buffy, Angel, all of those. I learned so much about dialogue and how how characters can talk and sound like real people, but still deliver the things that they need to deliver, and get so much character across. And you know, there's certain bits which always sort of like stick with me, and it's things like, you know, Mal Reynolds saying like, "Do you want to run this ship?" and Jane saying yes, and then Mal just being completely flustered and going, "Well, you can't."
Yeah, exactly.
It's brilliant. It's genius. It's this amazing bit of dialogue that just, it encapsulates the characters so well, and it adds that sort of like genuine feel of dialogue of this character doesn't know what to say, he's flustered, and it's brilliant. And yeah, so pretty much what Dyrk said. I just named a TV series.
I like it. Mike?
For me, my favorites, two recent things I'm really enjoying is interruptions and people literally just ignoring each other, asking questions, and the other characters are kind of like, don't want to talk about that, or have something else on their mind, and just completely ignoring them. Characters talking over each other. You have two people and they're both trying to have their own conversation. And so you get both sides of a conversation where they're talking at each other, because people do that a lot, rather than with or to each other. And I am a fan of banter. And yeah, that and chop your fucking dialogue down.
All right. Well, this has been a really fantastic episode. As with the last episode, I think it would be cool if you are listening or watching to this, you can let us know what is a particularly good bit of art, whether that's in books or in movies or in TV series, that you think really nailed the dialogue. Let us know why and what that is, and we'll hopefully do our best to respond. So thank you everyone for listening or watching, and we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for watching Wizards, Warriors, and Words. If you enjoyed this, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel so that we can keep growing this and keep sharing our writing advice with more authors. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.